Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another episode of Open Money where we talk to real people about their personal financial journeys. On this episode, we are talking with Rachel. She's about to embark on a mini retirement in Mexico and she's also chasing the FIRE dream, financial independence, retire early. So let's hear how it's going.
Hello, my name is Rachel. I live in Atlanta currently.
Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. How about you tell us a little bit about where you stand financially?
So I have like Mint and my brokerage account opened in front of me. So uh, I guess I would say, you know what, let's just do like the absolute penny to today. So according to Mint, my net worth is 296,737 and 59 cents, but that's including the equity in my house, which I just went under contract for. So, it, one thing to consider when people are talking about particularly property as investments is that the transaction costs are enormous. So 9,000 of that, which is pretty reasonable, 4.5% is going to be the selling fees.
Absolutely. Do you want to break down your assets?
So most of it's retirement accounts because I kind of am planning in the future to do the Roth ladder. So I just figure I might as well put as much as I can in there. So currently in my Roth IRA, I have $28,491.65. My HSA, $22,753.60. Although I just treat that like a traditional IRA. I don't really intend to take anything out of it. And then my 401k has currently what does it have? $115,510, and then I think I have like 3,200 in IRA a rollover IRA from like college. So yeah, that makes up the investments. 5,000 in I bonds that I bought just recently, matured, and about 8,000 in cash.
Okay. And then you just sold your house. What are
Yes.
you? I think that was your only debt, right?
Yeah, so I guess the house just went under contract for 197,000 effectively. And then of course subtract the selling fees from that, and then the mortgage I had on it was $82,744.
And what's the plan? Where are you gonna live?
My last day at my job is going to be August 31st, and then I will be storing all my stuff at my parents, and then moving to Mexico for, I don't know, 6 months to 2 years. It's not really that different to me, but kind of taking a mini retirement before going back into the workforce.
Okay, so what prompted you to do a mini retirement? Because that is fascinating.
So I think I just generally have like a bohemian-ish kind of spirit, a little restless. I did a lot of travel. So when I graduated college, I worked for a couple years, saved up some money, and then I backpacked in Europe for 3 months, came back, didn't really know what to do. So then I hiked the Appalachian Trail for 6 months. And then that's when I kind of, just to give a sense of how restless I can be. But then I trained myself as a software engineer, and I've been doing that for the past 4 years or so. And I actually really love my profession. It's incredibly fun. I highly recommend it. The flexibility is incredible. You get to work with incredibly smart people. So I really loved my job, but I will say we're a startup. And during the beginning of the pandemic, we were doing consulting to basically fund our product. And we lost our largest client. And so things were not great. And the good news is, I was working during it. They kept me on, even though it was kind of a difficult time for the company. But, we missed our bonuses and software engineering. It's kind of crazy how exponential the salary growth is as you get more experience. And so we had kind of an adjustment last year, but I would say that I'm fairly under market value for my experience. In fact, this is all about numbers. So I'll just say my salary, which was so 113,000 plus 10% bonus, usually, if as long as the company can afford it,
Yeah.
5% 401k match, and kind of all the other general benefits of health insurance, dental, things
That's
like
a
that.
pretty incredible gig to be stepping away from. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I know the thing is, I know other people who've kind of moved on, and
Mhm.
it is a testament to the company they work for that it's shocking in software engineering. I think the average turnaround is like 2 years. People on average stay 2 years in their jobs, and I've been there for 4 years. And the people who have moved on from my company, usually somewhere between 3 and 4 years, which is incredibly 50% above average for the industry.
I am shocked to hear that people stay on average 2 years.
It's because honestly, it's because of the money.
Mhm.
It is in it's getting a lot better. In fact, I learned not in college. I was actually a philosophy and communications major.
Mhm.
But these boot camps that have kind of sprung up, you have to be very careful because I've had experience with the one I went to, which was amazing. But I know some out there that are absolutely scammy. So the
Yeah.
reputation is incredibly important. But you can go through those things or even self-taught and enter these pretty high-paying profession, which
Wow.
yeah, you don't even need a college degree at this point, but that makes it sound like any
You have to know what you're doing
yeah,
still.
exactly. You need to know what you're doing and you need to know how to learn, but that's why it's such a great career because if you love learning, you're constantly learning.
Could you speak to how long it would take for someone who can pick that up? Because I understand not everyone can pick that up. Not everyone kind of speaks computer, so to speak. How quickly could you teach yourself? And then what does that salary trajectory look like? Because you said it does grow exponentially.
So I'll give both mine and also what I think my market value is.
Yeah.
The boot camp that I went to was 4 months.
Hmm.
I think I spent interestingly, they kind of recommend in a lot of them, and I think this is bad advice of like, oh, just keep applying to jobs. It's a numbers game. I was more like, I'm just going to post boot camp. They kind of give you like the bare minimum, and I
Hmm.
always describe it because I've also been on the hiring side as well. Like, what employers are looking for is yes, you had the basics that the boot camp did, plus something else.
Okay.
So, taking some time after to really hone and understand what you're doing and get a good mental model.
Yeah.
Um, so 4 months of the boot camp, I think about a month or two networking and looking for jobs. So I actually got my job by going to a JavaScript meetup, which is the language of the web.
Hmm.
I, in fact, made a technical talk that I gave as a presentation there, and that connected me with someone who told me about this job opportunity. And it turned out two people from my boot camp already worked at that company. So, like,
Yeah.
by the time I applied, I was basically already hired.
Yeah.
So I applied
Relationships
to like,
matter.
yeah. So I started off at 75,000.
Okay. Is that a traditional starting pay for?
Now it is, I think, just
Mhm.
because salaries for, because of inflation and cost of living. I would say you can expect 65. There's two routes. I always say, like, often what you'll get first is like maybe an internship thing, which is like 50K
Mhm.
equivalent. And then you do that for a few months. And then the intention is to hire you and you might get up to the 75.
Mhm.
Or you can kind of just come in really solid at 75, maybe add 10K
Yeah.
because 4 years have gone by. Um, a little negotiating trick. I was pretty happy with myself. So one thing that's good for programming is that you come with a resume or you come with like your projects that show that you can do the things that you're saying that you can do.
Yeah.
It's not like relying on, oh, you were at this job for 3 years, so I assume you have enough experience to do
Yeah.
this. Um, so I remember when I did the coding challenge for the company that I work for, I like spent 4 solid days on it, like making this application, like 8 hour days, like really typing it up and knowing it through and through. So by the time I got there, like I think blew them away.
Yeah.
And when the CEO was like, okay, what are you thinking? And I was like, well, I know that the average salary for a boot camp grad is 65,000,
Mhm.
but I'm better than average. And So that's how he made the offer of 75.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really funny because when we were hiring someone else, he was like, it came up, he talked about, I know you, when you did your interview, you were really pushing for 75K.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, it's really funny that you say that because I know I didn't give you a number,
Mm-hmm.
because I went in intentionally knowing that I was not going to give you one because he actually did offer more than I was thinking.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that'll work in every situation. It's definitely a put up or shut up kind
Yeah.
of thing. Like you can come off as obnoxious if you're overestimating your talent,
Yeah.
but it worked for me.
But I think, especially as a woman, women are notoriously known for not negotiating their starting salary, and it shoots them in the foot, and that kind of explains a lot of the reason, not the whole reason, of course, why women are behind in wages, because men are notorious for negotiating their starting salary. So I love to hear that you did that because I wish more women would.
And even if it's like entry, I think it depends on the job. Like
Mhm.
if you're like my post college jobs where I'm like, my parents are like, I was very fortunate. They paid for my college. They paid for, my living expenses up until, and I took an extra year too because I was not a great student. And then when I graduated, they're like, okay, that's enough. Those early jobs really were kind of, I wouldn't say minimum wage, but they
Mhm.
were kind of like set salaries.
Mhm.
But nothing makes you want to get a job that pays more than having a really, really bad job.
Very true. Very true. What would the range be on the top end that you could work your way to?
Um, I have about 4 years experience. I have some management experience at this point. I've done other things. I actually think my market value is somewhere around 150 to 160K per year.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't want to like blame the company when it comes to market value. Like I may be worth that to the market, but they might not be able to afford that. And
Yeah.
that's, if you want to take that risk, you have to go out and get a different job.
And some of the biggest pay bumps come when you switch when you switch companies.
Exactly. But if you're going into big tech, like Fang is really popular. So that's Facebook,
Mm.
Amazon, Apple, Apple, Netflix, and Google.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know why Microsoft isn't in there either, because I consider them like the big tech. But those jobs tend to be like, even if you're coming in entry, although people who are entry in those things are people who are kind of exceptional and
Yeah.
usually have some experience.
Yeah.
And the minimum you would get is like somewhere between 180 and 200, and then it goes up from there. So
Oh, wow.
Netflix is the hardest one. Like that is kind of like the NBA of tech jobs, and I think they'll pay
Really?
up to 400,000 a year. But that's like saying like I'm going to get a job at Netflix. It's like saying like I'm going to go to Harvard. It's really they are kind of getting the absolute best and most knowledgeable people in the industry.
Interesting. I had no idea. This is not an industry I know at all. So fascinating.
Yeah. So, but as far as like mine, so went from 75, this was really nice. Like even 3 months in, it was the new year, went to 76 after working there for 3 months. Then went up to 80, I think the year after, I think 84 the year after that, and that's when it froze. Then I took a sabbatical, which was really nice because honestly, we didn't have a lot of clients
Yeah.
and I was going crazy during the pandemic because I was very isolated.
Yeah.
So I moved back with my parents for 4 months. But then when I got back, we had an adjustment and that's what brought me up to the 113 that I make now.
Awesome. Well, that's incredible. And now you're stepping away from that. So I assume the income goes to zero except for investments.
Yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm going to have, once I sell this place, more cash than I've ever
Yes.
had in my life. So the way I figure is I am going to put another 5,000 in the I bonds just so in
Mhm.
a year, depending on what I decide to do, I'll have at least that cash that hasn't
Mhm.
lost any value. And then I figured I'll just keep 20,000 in my checking because I also assume when I get my tax returns, because my income is going to be lower this year than I'm being taxed for.
Mhm.
So, I'm probably going to get a few thousand at least when I do my tax return. So 20,000 now, I'm going to Mexico. So my budget, I'm hoping, will be somewhere between $1,300 and $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
And then probably put the rest in. I've never invested in bonds before just because I've always had a salary, but I might do something more reliable. But my instinct is just to put in the equities that I have done.
Yeah.
So maybe that's where my riskiness comes in. It's like I really want high equity.
I think that's like a hard call in your position because I mean, obviously, if someone's young, you're always like, well, just invest it. You got a long time horizon, but you're trying to do a whole bunch of mini retirements. That changes things for sure because you need cash readily accessible.
Yes. And the way I also figure is like I can always take some from my Roth,
Mm-hmm.
why I put in the 6,000 every
Mm-hmm.
year, to kind of pull out. Yeah, I don't know. I almost want to ask what your opinion is. Like, how much cash should I have without putting you in a legally precarious situation?
I mean, none of this is financial advice. I if I were in your shoes, what I would do is make sure that I have enough to cover my bases for a year.
Yeah.
Just because I love the stock market. I love investing and I think you should be investing. But if you want to step away from the workforce, I'd have a year. You can always go back to work. This is not someone stepping into retirement and planning that for 40 years. It's a mini retirement. So I think I would be a person to say that I would have a year to fall back on because you can always reassess. Do you want to go back to work at that point? Do you want to extend your mini retirement for longer? And the fact that you're going to Mexico is a very affordable compared to America. So that's what I would do, not financial advice, opinion.
Exactly. But I do like that it's aligned with exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
But I think it leads to, I mentioned I do have this aspiration to work for a big tech company, just experiencing something. The kind of styles of work are the startup company, and then there's the old tech. And the one area I don't really recommend working for is, like if you work for a company who's doing one thing else and you're on their tech team,
Mm-hmm.
you have kind of a mix of styles. I think this is true in all industries. And so I can say work we used to consult for, that was our big client, a big four consulting firm on their mergers and acquisitions
Mm-hmm.
software. And it was incredibly frustrating working in that environment. Um, but startups are really fun because you move really fast. Like it's so breakneck, which can be stressful, but also just really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
As the established guy, you move a lot slower and you might be frustrated by how slow, but everything is really methodical and
Yes.
thoughtful from what I
You have
understand.
systems in place.
So part of this kind of mini retirement is I do want to keep my skills up, maybe work on a personal project um, and also a big part of these interviews is that like literally doing some algorithm practice. So they'll give you like some sort of problem and you just have to like solve it and explain how efficient it is. And most of this doesn't really have anything to do with what you do day to day as a
Yeah.
software developer, but this is their like, how do we tell that you can think strategically and critically?
Yeah.
But it is really interesting how divorced it is from the day to day work. So
Interesting. But I mean, sometimes I look at college like that. I don't really think everyone needs to go to college, but a lot of times I think companies that require a degree don't necessarily care what your degree is in. It just shows your capacity for critical thinking and learning more so than it's trained for a specific job.
yeah, I think that's an excellent comparison. Um, but I think when I heard about this series and like, oh, this is a time to share like my opinions. I think in personal finance, there's a lot of emphasis. And that said, like I have a pretty relatively frugal compared to my income. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think last year I had an extremely high budget of like $45,000 a year.
Extremely high
Yeah,
based on your income.
yeah. So, but that was me introducing things like the pandemic was not kind to my body. So getting like a personal trainer, I took vacations just like everybody else. So that was actually a pretty high budget for me. Um, but I think a lot of people emphasize uh, in personal finance frugality, which
Mm-hmm.
it's funny as a semi-frugal person, I think that's kind of really bad focus area for most people. Making more money will be way more effective than cutting back on whatever little luxury that you have to get through the day is.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so part of this is like if I take this mini retirement, sure, I might be spending X amount of money. But if I spend a little bit of time increasing my skills and I can land these jobs that, start at 200,000,
Mhm.
taking $20,000 and also enjoying my life at the same time is actually just a really good investment at that point.
Mhm.
Yeah, make more money.
I would agree with that. Like, personally, I look at money as a tool. I don't care about having the most money. I care about having enough money to live the life that I want. And I think as long as you're living the life you want and you can afford the life you want, you're set. Like, I don't think the amount that you have matters. I don't think having more than anyone else matters. It just matters that you can do what you want in life. And if spending something on a luxury that you enjoy matters, then spend it. As long as you can afford it.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I think about it because I'm like fire in the sense that financial independence is really important to me, and I can get into also I think there's some very like personal psychological money scripts that have to do with this valuing of independence and flexibility
Mhm.
and all that. But I also like I definitely work to live and not live to work.
Yeah.
Like so that fire movement really appeals to me. A lot of people worry about like, what if I retire and I don't have anything to do? I'm like, I don't have that problem. I know.
Well, you are retiring to another country to explore. Like, I don't think you're going to get bored.
Exactly.
And you have a planned return to work too. So that changes it as opposed to someone retiring at, say, 70, and maybe they don't have the option. They could have been forced to retire, medically unable to downsize, things like that. So I do think there are different circumstances at play.
Oh, for sure. Um, but I'm going for fire, and when I think about like what my fire number is,
Mhm.
it's more just like every time I move the meter up or down, I'm like, this would be the life that I could live if I had, equivalent to 35K versus 40K versus
Mhm.
50K. And sometimes I'm like, I could probably have a really enjoyable life if I had 20,000 a year, like I'm planning to spend in Mexico right now.
Mhm.
But I'm really like, what is the number if I am willing to go to a different country with a lower cost of living where I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm going to wake up in the morning and literally do everything that I want from
Mhm.
morning till night. I think that number is about $40,000, which puts my number around a million to
Yeah.
1.25 um, million. So that's really what I'm shooting for. Uh, but but I think it's like what I love about personal finance. It's just really fun to fantasize about like what your life will look like,
Mhm.
even though things change. And I think being flexible is really important. But having a plan that builds in flexibility and
Yeah.
choice is super exciting.
I always like the attitude of have a goal, but be flexible in your approach because life rarely goes according to plan.
Yeah, 100%. Like I always have a plan, but it's funny because people are like, "Oh, Rachel, you never do your plans that you have. You make these big plans and you don't do them." And it's like, well, I always do like my current plan, whatever I'm working towards. But if I see something more interesting or flashy, like I'll just change my plan, but
Yeah.
always have a plan.
So I have to ask, you're doing a mini retirement.
Mhm.
You're shooting for fire. Do you have an age that you want to fire and like completely step away from the workforce? Do you have other mini retirement plans that you would like to do, or what does the trajectory look like?
So I think, I part of creating that flexibility is I probably am going to work another 4 years and then take another mini retirement. That
Yeah.
sounds like something I would do. Uh, so I kind of think of it as like my goal is to maybe have like somewhere between 8 to 10 more working years.
Okay.
Whenever I'm doing
Total.
retirement. Yeah. So I've worked very little in my life. I'm very lazy. So really, as far as like actually a solid career, I've only been my career life is probably about 4 years now.
Okay.
That went from taking me from a net worth of like literally zero. Like
Mhm.
I did embarrassingly like call my parents. I'm like, okay, I finally have income coming in, but can I like right before I started my career, like, can I borrow $1,000 just to make sure I can pay off my credit card? And then I paid it back the next month,
Yeah.
which I will say is like an incredible privilege. Like to have that security net to like take the risk to spend
Mhm.
a lot of money on something that was it turned out to be an incredible investment in my career. But I really probably would only have been willing to do that if I knew that in the catastrophic situation,
Yeah.
that I had a place to go or like it wasn't going to bury me.
I'm very much in that kind of position. Like, I take chances in life, but I know that if something happens, my husband would pick me up if I fall. I know that if my husband doesn't, my mom would. And if my mom doesn't, my brother would. So I've got like these tiers of people that I know I could always rely on.
Yeah. So it's a very similar. I forgot. You might notice that I love talking and I have a mile a minute, but I forgot why I brought up the going from that. Oh, taking risks
Any
and
other planned mini retirements?
yeah, probably. Oh, my point was going to be that in those 4 years, so going literally from zero
Mm-hmm.
to a net worth of about $300,000.
It's incredible. In 4 years. That's amazing, just so you know.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think it's incredible. I will say when my grandparents passed away, they gave my parents 60K and they decided to take 20K of it so that they matched my down payment when I bought this place. So I feel often people have the instinct to hide that when they're talking about their financial successes. Like this is not, this is a village situation
Yes.
where I had a lot of support in my life
Yeah.
to bring me to a point where, essentially somehow I when I think about it, like, did I really go from zero to 300,000 in 4 years? Like, it doesn't sound right or possible, but I guess it happened because I'm looking at the mint and that's what it tells me.
What'd your savings rate look like during that time?
So interestingly, I think it was higher when my income was lower.
Yep.
Um, so I started off like probably spending about 24K a year when I had the 75K salary.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
incredible.
Yeah, and then I think after that, it probably moved up to, I probably started doing vacations or something. So probably moved up to like 32 because I do like to travel.
Mhm.
So it's always somewhere like, I would say it's usually pretty close to the 50% range. I'd like it to be higher. And I think sometimes I lie to myself about it being higher because I like the idea that I'm saving so much. But this was the first year where I felt like I really broke the dam. Like I took a vacation to Vail. I went to Mexico City for a month. Um, I got a personal trainer. Last year, I started taking Spanish lessons. So I think those things really accumulated from going from like 30K, 32, pretty happy life, and just like really spending on things that I enjoy.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
like that. I can tell you at various points in my life, I have actually saved over 90%, like 95% or 98%. I don't recommend it. My life was not at peak enjoyment during that time. It was more of just like having a lot of fear around like what could potentially come. But now I consciously try to keep our savings rate around 50%. And that's me like reminding myself that it's okay to spend because I'm just a person who's like, let's not spend anything at all. But life is more enjoyable with a 50% savings rate, far more enjoyable.
Yeah, you've probably come across the like Mr. Money mustache,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
savings rate 2 years to retirement. So my goal is to work less than my savings rate, but I think a big part of the equation why I think it's potentially achievable. Of course, the worst case scenario is like, oh, maybe I have to work 15 years, like
Yeah.
boo-hoo. But
That's not terrible. A 15-year working career.
I think because of my willingness to like live in a different country,
Mm-hmm.
that's what moves down the number of years, even though my savings rate isn't quite, high enough to keep the same spending that I have, because of course the United States is very expensive.
Always going to be inflated in the States. Now, do you have any plan to ever sort of like work part-time in fire? Because I know a lot of people who do fire kind of take on a secondary career in life. Is that the goal or just more to travel and experience life and live it up?
I mean, honestly, if I could work part-time now, that would be the dream, but I
Yeah.
do, and I can see why, like part-time work isn't super big. I mean, I might even do some contracting work with my
Yeah.
company that I'm currently leaving,
Mhm.
which would be a nice way of kind of extending it so that my investments are still growing and living off of a salary.
Absolutely. Kind of a way to bridge the gap.
Yeah, so if I could work 10 hours a week and make, uh, you know, 40,000 a year, that would be kind of like the ideal scenario. So I'd be kind of doing coast fire.
Yeah.
But I would have to have that opportunity come around, and I'm not sure it's quite there. But no, I don't think I really intend to work once I retire. I really like taking classes, like I'm learning Spanish right now, and that's just an incredibly fun way to spend time talking to people around the world and learning something cool. I've kind of always wanted to learn an instrument better. Any kind of like learning thing, I'm really attracted, and that's really what I'm working for. So when I'm calculating like what my retirement, what I want it to look like, it's like, well, let's just assume that I'm going to take like 20 hours of piano lessons a month, because I don't want to practice. I want to have guided practice, and I take 20 hours of language lessons, and I take 20 hours of BES, which is already building up to almost like an 8-hour workday by the time I get all of
You're going to be working 60 hours a week on learning.
Except, not getting paid for it, which is what unfortunately makes it enjoyable.
True. As far as fire goes, you're relatively young. Do you have any family plans, and will that change the fire dream?
I think that's what makes it so achievable. I really don't have any plans to have a family.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know who it was that I was listening to, because I've always got some sort of personal finance thing in the background. So I thought put it really well, is that you can afford to do anything. You can't afford to do everything. So, the vast majority of people are going to want to have a family. And of course, that's going to change their financial plan. So, I'm fortunate that I can do all of this exciting stuff, but it comes at the expense of something, fortunately, I actually don't really have that much interest in doing anyways. Yeah. So it's kind of the ideal scenario, because it's not even a sacrifice in order to live the life that I kind of envision for myself.
Yeah. Well, then I think that kind of makes the fire dream easier. Honestly, I think fire becomes harder when people have kids. Kids are very expensive. So
yeah, I mean, I was a fortune. I was very lucky to grow up in a pretty affluent family.
Yeah.
And, when I calculate, granted, there's cheaper ways to raise children, but just like you have lifestyle inflation, you're probably going to have that with your family as well. When I calculate it, like, I cannot understand their decision at all, at least to have more than one child. I have two siblings, but I'm a twin, so I joke that my sister was an accident, but
that's cute. I'm sure your sister does not appreciate it.
I'm the older one, so they'll have to take it.
You get to hold that over their life forever, like that you're 2 to 3 minutes older.
Actually, that's pretty accurate, because unrelated, but my parents actually didn't know that they were having twins until delivery day. This was before ultrasounds were like standard.
Yeah, that's a shock, major shock.
I mean, it was. I mean, in hindsight, it seems to make a lot of sense. And even back then, they could usually detect if there were twins. And my mom was like, yeah, I was enormous. So how is this possible? But something that is like their little financial story was, so twins come out, and my dad was an attorney and had his own private practice. So, was doing well. And he was talking
immediately like, I need to get back to work because there's now two.
Well, yeah, but a big part of it was, they were in the city, in Chicago. And he asked the doctor, oh, do you have kids? Do you send your kids to public school or private school? He said private school. And my dad was like, how much does private school cost? And the doctor told him, and my mom says that he was probably on the phone with a real estate agent within like 10 minutes, just because of kind of the extraordinary cost. But, typically because schools are funded by real estate taxes, if you live in an affluent area, you're probably going to be going to what is basically a private school. So I was, again, very fortunate that I went to, even though I went to public school, I didn't feel like the right disclaimer to say that, like, oh yeah, I'm a public school kid.
It was carefully selected as far as which public school you went to.
Exactly.
Yeah. I get that. I mean, there's a reason people pick schools and pick where their address is so their kid goes to the best school possible. And if you can fund it with your taxes as opposed to your taxes that you have to pay anyway, plus a fee to the school, why not do that?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely the go-to, and I think why there is such a movement to the suburbs, particularly when people have a family. And I grew up in the suburbs, but I'm not really interested in going back to that life. I'm more of a city kind of dweller. I like the amenities of a city. So yeah, even just more reasons why this family thing doesn't really work for me.
I get that. So if you could leave people with one message about money, what do you wish people knew or how they thought about it or anything from that perspective?
Um, I mean, I think it comes down to just like any other decision in your life, that it comes down to what you value. And I think everybody should always be working on maximizing the value that they get from their money. And I don't mean like returns. I mean, each dollar, how much does it marginally add to your happiness, and organizing your life around it to have that kind of maximum personal return. So for some people who particularly love, I think before we started, I don't think we were recording, you were saying for yourself that you used to be fired, but you're like, I love my job. So I moved down my savings rate because I would enjoy working until retirement age or closer to retirement age. And I think that means that that was an active decision to maximize kind of the marginal returns on each additional dollar. The other thing to recognize is that people often don't talk about money with reducing marginal returns. They often talk about goods. The example I got in econ class is, if I gave you a Twix bar, you'd be like, wow, my life has improved probably. And then if I give you 5 Twix bars, you're like, oh, well, I can store these at home. So like still increasing. And then I give you the 6. And then if I get up to like the millionth Twix bar, you're going to have to get a warehouse, and you're going to have to pay for that warehouse to store all these Twix bars. So you've actually got negative marginal return with each additional Twix bar. I don't think there's a point with money that you get to a negative marginal return, but if you think about, like, if you have $1 million, the addition of $1 and the amount of difference it's going to make in your life is quite small. It's probably not even going to change your behavior at all. But if you make $10,000, or if you only have $10,000 and that's like your income, $1 is the difference between like eating.
Yeah.
So when you're calculating how to live your life, I wouldn't think that your goal should be to have X amount of money. It should be to, what will I need to support the life I want to live?
I love that. I agree with that. I love that. What are your guys' thoughts on FIRE? I'm actually really curious, and I love the idea of a mini retirement. I think they're really exciting, and I think they're a nice way to break up your working years. So if you can fit them in, I think that's amazing. What are your thoughts? Leave them in the comments down below. I post new videos every single week. If you would like to be part of the Open Money series, all you have to do is send me an email at erintalksmoney@gmail.com. We can talk about net worth, we can talk about budgets, financial goals, you name it, we can talk about it. Because the more we talk about real journeys with real people, I think it helps people more. So if you're willing to share, I'd love to feature you. Like I said, I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. Or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you soon. Bye.